We all know his work. He gave the world characters like Willy Wonka and my personal favorite, Matilda. But from the same mind came child-killing witches and, more notoriously, Trunchbull. His writings are often accompanied with sadness and suffering, and also paint women in an unflattering light, aside from Miss Honey, which, P.S. her little cottage is goals. Let's take a peek beyond the pages of another famous children's author and find out why his own wife dubbed him Roald the Rotten, a more than well-deserved nickname. Magic mirror on the wall, who is the most rotten one of all? Hi, hello, and howdy, my darlings. It is I, your not so evil queen, Joshua Waters, and welcome to Rotten to the Core. This is the history podcast where we use my magic mirror and just a smidge of humor and look into the lives and actions of some of history's rotten apples, all with the goal of learning a lesson or two from them that can help us in our current lives. It is finally February and I love it. The month began with a day of sunshine and boy did I miss it. The gray of January just drains my usual sunny disposition. I was inspired by this episode when the new movie Wonka came out. I started thinking about the other works of Roald Dahl and where he drew his inspiration from. Don't get me started on the fact that Charlie's grandpa was completely bedridden until something fun came around, letting his daughter work herself to the bone, but a tour of the chocolate factory, that got his legs working. Roald Dahl's life was like something out of a book, so no wonder he went into writing. Are you like me when you think of a children's author? You think of someone like Mr. Rogers, always kind, respectful, and caring of everyone. I'm always so shocked when I find out that they were rotten. Don't worry, Mr. Rogers is safe. I checked. I also think, how can someone who brings joy to so many children be so vile? Well, let's see if we can figure out where the dark side of Roald Dahl came from. He was born in 1916 in Wales to Norwegian parents Harold and Sophie Dahl, and they got his name from a polar explorer, Roald Amundsen. He had 5 sisters, 2 older ones from his father's first marriage, and a common theme among a lot of our rotten lessons, he dealt with loss at a young age. At first with the death of his sister, Ostry, who died from a busted appendix at the age of 7, then, 3 weeks later, his dad died of pneumonia. Now, Dahl's daddy, Harold, he was a pretty successful shipbroker and a self-made man who left the family plenty of money to get by. And his mother decided to remain in Wales instead of returning to Norway because her husband wanted his children to attend English schools, which he thought were the best in the world. Roald Dahl expressed later in life how much he hated his private schools. He described an environment of cruelty, domination, even having to act as servants to the older students or he'd get a harsh beating. Makes me think of Draco Malfoy. My father will hear of this. In 1932, when he graduated, his mother offered to pay for his whole tuition at Oxford or Cambridge University. His response, though, was, "No thank you. I want to go straight from school to work for a company that will send me to wonderful, faraway places like Africa or China." So he did. First, he went on an expedition to Newfoundland, but eventually took a job working in Tanzania for Shell Oil Company. That wouldn't cut it, though. The craving for adventure kept Roald constantly searching for new and exciting things to do. In 1939, he made the decision to join the Royal Air Force and trained in Nairobi before becoming a fighter pilot during World War II. While serving, though, he was shot down in Alexandria, Egypt, in the Libyan desert and had to make an emergency crash landing. And from that crash, he hit his head hard and suffered the pain of it for the rest of his life. His spine and hip were also injured, and he required multiple surgeries afterwards to fix them. He even saved a piece of his femur to use as a paperweight in his office from one of the surgeries. At first I thought, I hate that. It's his. From that experience came his first venture into writing, a short story of heroism called Shot Down Over Libya. Although, according to one critic, it would have been more accurately titled Veered Off Course Over Desert Before Disastrous Emergency Landing. But you didn't hear it from me. And once he was fully recovered, Roald Dahl was sent to Washington, D.C. as an air attaché. I had to look up what that meant. An air attaché is the representative of the Chief of Staff for the Air Force, and they are responsible for working directly with the host nation's Air Force. The more you know. And that work introduced Roald to espionage and the activities of the Canadian spy master William Stephenson, also known as codename Intrepid. During the war, Dahl supplied intelligence from Washington to Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and as he later said, "My job was to help Winston get on with FDR and tell Winston what was on the old boy's mind." Scandal. I think it's so neat to learn about real spies. Roald supplied intelligence to the Canadian Prime Minister's organization known as British Security Coordination, which was part of MI6, the British CIA. You may remember it as who the fictional spy James Bond worked for, which Roald Dahl actually helped write one of the screenplays for one of the films, You Only Live Twice. So a real spy helped write a real spy movie. Neat. In 1943, Roald wrote The Gremlins for Walt Disney, and it didn't do very well. He also wrote several popular adult books too, including Someone Like You and Kiss Kiss. He then began writing stories for his 4 children in 1960. That's when the world was given James and the Giant Peach and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which became bestsellers. Roald would often read his stories to his children and said that children were the best critics because they're totally honest. They also taught him how to capture and hold the wandering imagination of children for the duration of a story. His children's books have been the subject of some controversy, as critics and parents said that their portrayal of children's harsh revenge on adult wrongdoers is bad. In his defense, Dahl claimed that children have a cruder sense of humor than adults, and he was just merely trying to appeal to his readers. Which is valid. Have you ever been roasted by a kid? Absolutely brutal, and honestly, they're never wrong. Altogether, Roald Dahl wrote 19 children's books, my favorite being Matilda. But espionage wasn't the only thing Roald Dahl did when he came to the U.S. He turned from a somewhat shy fella to a ladies' man. He had affairs with actress Ginger Rogers and alleged marathon sex sessions with heiress Claire Booth Lucy. A close friend of his even said that he slept with anyone on the East and West Coast that made over $50,000 a year. Eventually, he did settle down enough to marry an Oscar-winning actress, Patricia Neal, who was on the rebound from Clark Gable, which, yes please. However, a gorgeous Oscar winner just wasn't enough to quench the appetite of Roald. He would cheat on her constantly throughout their marriage, even with close friends of hers. Apparently, not as close as she thought. But adultery wasn't the only thing that caused strife in their marriage. Their youngest son was injured badly when a taxi hit his baby carriage. And their oldest daughter died at the age of 7 from measles, the same age his sister was when she died. Poor fella. His wife Patricia also suffered from a large stroke, and it left her in a coma for weeks. It also paralyzed half of her face and body, and unable to move as well as she could before, which is difficult enough to accept personally. You think your own husband would have been supportive and helpful, but Patricia once said that she overheard Roald telling their own children, with a sneer, "Mummy could do things only if she wanted." Bless her heart. Well, one of the friends of Patricia that Roald Dahl was cheating on her with was named Felicity Crossland, and he eventually divorced Patricia to marry her 11 years after they began sleeping together. And aside from the adultery in the children's books, Roald also wrote multiple articles for Playboy called Switch B-Word, which critics described as viciously pornographic and misogynistic. I'm shocked. While being a womanizing adulterer doesn't make him an evil person, if those were the only qualifications for being rotten, then half the population would be an episode. Roald Dahl was essentially a bully, which is even more shocking since he was bullied so harshly as a kid. Like I said earlier, his own wife dubbed him Roald the Rotten, which, after what he did to her, is a more than kind nickname. Could have been a lot worse. I would have. He was so mean that one of his American publishers decided to drop him because of his attitude, saying, "You have behaved to us in a way that is unmatched in my experience for overbearingness and utter lack of civility." For anyone wishing to tell off a colleague in a work email, that's a good way to say you're a giant dick, professionally. That publisher also happened to be Jewish, and Roald was unrelenting in his anti-Semitic dislike and opinions about them. Yes, another one. He was once thrown out of a country club for yelling about the amount of Jews he had to look at while eating. Even worse, he publicly questioned why the Jews in Nazi death camps didn't fight back, as if they were to blame for their horrific murders. He said once, "I'd rather have a go at taking one of the guards with me, but they were always so submissive." That statement makes me want to dig him up and slap him right across the face. Even though he was so vocal, a lot of people still didn't know Roald Dahl's beliefs. Some even claim that he would say stuff just to get a reaction out of people, like a toddler. Others defend him by saying that his views were not untypical of his generation, which I don't take as an excuse for anything. Once in a paper called The New Statesman, he said, "There is a trait in the Jewish character that does provoke animosity. There's always a reason why anti-anything crops up. Even a stinker like Hitler didn't just pick them for no reason." Disgusting. Two young fans of his even wrote to him once saying, "Dear Mr. Dahl, we love your books, but we have a problem. We are Jews. You don't like us because we are Jews, and that offends us. Can you please change your mind about what you said?" He never responded. Even his own kids didn't care for him. His own daughter once said, "Daddy gave joy to millions of children, but I was dying inside." Today, Roald Dahl remains one of the greatest children's storytellers of the 20th century. I mean, a new movie just came out based on his work. I also don't know how my own childhood would have been affected had I never learned about a powerful and intelligent little girl with a ribbon in her hair and telekinetic powers. But who would have guessed it was written by someone more akin to the book's antagonist, Miss Trunchbull. Roald Dahl lived to the age of 74, when he died after suffering from an unspecified infection at John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford, England. His work still holds a firm grasp on most of us today. I doubt there is a person alive who is not familiar with at least one of his writings. He is a true lesson on how something sweet can still grow out of the most rotten of apples. This brings us to the end of our lesson for today, my darlings. Let's cleanse ourselves, and I'll let you be off on your next adventure. Just take a deep breath and ground yourself. I ask for clear communication between myself, my body, mind, and spirit, so that I may live in harmony with myself and those around me. Clear any negative thoughts about my mind and heart space. May I move forward with clarity and alignment with my highest self, so that I can move through my journey with ease and flow and magnetize my greatest desires. May I always remember that I am in constant connection and co-creation with Source. I appreciate and thank each and every one of you for supporting Rotten to the Core. Join me next week, and until then, be happy, find peace, and don't hurt anyone. If you enjoy Rotten to the Core, please follow me on Instagram or join me on Patreon. Both of those are at It's Rotten to the Core. My TikTok is at Rotten in History. You can also listen to me on my other podcast, Mystery Inc., which I do with my brother Shane. We also have a Facebook group called Shane and Josh's Rabbit Hole, where we will interact and have a plethora of extra fun, foul, mysterious, rotten, and historical things a-brewin'. Join me next time and have a great week ahead, everyone. Bye.